Welcome to another edition of the Official Jets podcast, the draft podcast presented by Pepsi. We got Dan Zbojovsky on this episode, the Director of Personnel Operations, which means
he's involved in a lot, not just on the college side. For a long time, DZ, who I think's been here 14 seasons now, probably entering his 15th season now. He was the coordinator of college scouting, but he added the pro side of things to his duties as well. So Dan's involved in a lot of things here behind the scenes.
And Dan, we'll get into this, is the guy who is on the horn with the league at the time that the Jets put in the player that they want to select. So high pressure situation. He's always come up clutch.
He's the guy in the spotlight. You're talking about a guy spotlight draft weekend. We think about Joe Douglas and Rex Hogan and company, but how about DZ? He's taking that name and calling the league, or in some cases, he's telling the league of trade conditions as well. So he's been doing that for a long time for the Jets. And you know this, being on the ground in Indianapolis, one of the things for a long time, one of his busiest weeks of the year was always the Indianapolis Combine. But like everybody this year, a lot of change involved in his duties. So for the Jets and the rest of the National Football League, you skip combines, you go right to pro days, and pro days are basically coming to an end right now. So that's signaling the real transition. The draft is almost here.
All right. We're going to talk some draft, you and I, but first, let's hear from Dan Zbojovsky. Dan, thanks for joining us here on the Official Jets podcast. You know, you wear a lot of hats throughout the course of the season. This is a very busy time of year for you. So how would you describe all the different hats you wear, and what is your role like in the draft in particular?
Sure. So in personnel operations, you know, we try to do our best to support our scouting department as a whole. It's myself and Christina Wedding, who's our coordinator of personnel ops. And our goal is really to get our scouts and the rest of our department all the tools they need to be able to evaluate players effectively. You know, in the fall, you know, that might mean getting them the information about the schools that they're assigned to, their prospect list, different data on those prospects themselves. And then, you know, throughout the year, we really, you know, support the group in preparing for all the different events, whether that be all-star games, the combine, our different meetings throughout the year, both on the pro and the college side, you know, free agency, which we just went through. And then, of course, preparing for the draft. So, you know, we get a chance together here to work with a lot of different departments and really support a lot of people. So that's really the most of it.
Speaking of that, DZ, a lot of people think data collection means statistics. It's a lot more than that. And what can you tell us as far as that process is concerned? Not only your role there, but also who you're connected with inside the organization.
Yeah, sure. So, you know, obviously we collect a lot of data on the prospects, both on the college and pro side that we're evaluating. You know, that process starts in just after the draft when we receive the new class from NFS. And, you know, that includes measurable data, initial background information, and evaluations from that group. And, you know, we have to make sure that we convey that to our scouts in the most effective way possible. So we work with our IT department, specifically Matt Capagrosso and Chris Miller, who do an outstanding job for us of really, you know, taking the ideas we have for how to share that information and developing really effective tools for our scouts that we can use throughout the year. You know, we've built really an outstanding scouting system here that is really efficient and effective for both our scouts on the road and our in-house scouts, as well as our coaches. So, you know, really thankful to that group for what they do. But yeah, we collect a lot of data throughout the year, specifically at this time of the year, a lot of pro day data where we get information about the workouts from these players and work to analyze that.
You know, you mentioned the pro days. We spoke to Dom Green, who talked about, you know, we kind of broke down what this process has been like, the pre-draft process without a typical combine, heavily reliant on pro days, just how important are pro days and what's it like for you, you know, organizing who goes to what pro day, this part of the country, all throughout the course of the past month or so?
Yeah, so obviously this year's been different as was last than a traditional year. You know, last year we had the combine, but essentially got called off the road right at the start of pro days, and then you know this year it's kind of the opposite. There's no in-person combine, and we're really heavily reliant on the pro day information to be able to gather this workout data and see how these players move around. So, being, off college campuses throughout the fall and not being able to see these players compete in person, not really getting to be up close and personal with them. The pro days are extremely valuable to us. We try to make sure that we have coverage at every one, of course, specifically at the ones where we have prospects we want to make sure we gather data on. But yeah, our scouts have done a great job getting on the road this spring, especially after mostly being at home throughout the fall, and really getting around and getting their eyes on these guys and really getting a chance to see how they compete, how they move in person, get that live scouting look and get that information conveyed to us through our system.
This year was different for everybody, but how unique was it for you? Because as Ethan and I both know, you are central command in Indianapolis when that combine begins in February. No combine this year. And you were the longtime coordinator of college scouting. So it's kind of twofold here. How different did it feel for you not having that week that takes up so much of your time? And also, you've added the pro responsibilities on to this. So how much did you get involved in free agency as well?
Yeah, sure. So as you mentioned, previously I was just the college scouting coordinator and really did a lot of my work just supporting our scouts in the various events, especially the combine, which is kind of the largest thing we plan for logistically. And as you mentioned, does take up a good deal of time, but being able to be involved with the pro department this year, specifically free agency, the process we just went through was really excellent. Working with Greg Nedjba and the rest of the group and those scouts, was really enjoyable for me. And to see that process and go through that this year without the combine allowed me to really focus on that, learn a lot about it, and really provide, I think, the most value I could there.
Dan, it feels like everyone has mastered, at least at this point, maybe not mastered, but gotten used to working from a virtual space. That includes your department. That includes our department here on the content side. But with the draft upcoming, with the different NFL protocols that allows you to be in the facility, what benefit does that add that maybe you didn't have last year at the draft, the virtual draft, hopefully the one and only?
Yeah, last year it obviously was very different for us, but I thought we did a great job, working with our entire support group here to be able to adjust to that. It was a challenge, but it was rewarding as well to be able to accomplish it, and it was unique, So I got to be honest, I did enjoy the process last year, the challenge of figuring out how to handle it, but this year will be a little bit more traditional, we hope, and there's obviously advantage to that. Just with communication and being able to meet with people more easily, and have discussions that previously might have a barrier between them. So I'm looking forward to having our group in and being able to see them and communicate with them a lot more easily.
Well, let's talk about having your group in. You guys are going to have these final pre-draft meetings here at One Jets Drive. Can you talk about what happens in these final stages before the draft? And also, how nice is it for you guys? How much of a benefit is it that the scouts are actually going to be here at One Jets Drive this year? Yeah,
so the April draft meeting process, you're really starting to looping in your coaches into the process. Throughout a normal year, they get their first exposure to the college players at the combine and then through the pro day and private workout process throughout March. And then the April meeting would be gathering together to discuss all the information that was acquired during that time period. So, we'll have updated spring reports from our scouts to discuss things that have happened since the end of the season, how their opinions may have changed about players. And then we'll get to hear how these players fit into our scheme according to our coaches, which this year specifically is huge for us. We spent a lot of time, in February, getting familiar with the new scheme, making adjustments to kind of what we were looking for and which players fit us a little bit better than they may have previously. And, the more we can be together and discuss those things and hear our coaches discuss players and how they fit and what traits they're looking for, the better for all of us. It's going to pay rewards for us, obviously through this draft and into next season moving forward. So being able to be around each other, participate in those meetings, it's really huge for us and a process that we're all looking forward to.
You kind of touched on it in your answer there, but I think a lot of fans will say, oh, the draft is in 3 weeks. There's not a lot that will change. Joe Douglas said there's still a lot of meat left on the bone. And as you just properly laid out, meetings still have to occur. How much, I guess how much meat is there left on the bone? How much
tinkering, huh?
Right. How much tinkering is there between now and the draft? Because a lot of people say 3 weeks, not a lot of time, but I feel like through a scout's eyes, 3 weeks is a ton of time.
Yeah. So, obviously the main thing that we always fall back on is the film. The games those players played throughout the fall, that's done already and has been reviewed. So that's always what you're going to fall back on, what happened on the field. But obviously there's different things that have happened since then. We've had the Senior Bowl. In a normal year, we'd have even more All-Star games. And this year, this Pro Day process. And, as I mentioned earlier, being able to see these players compete in person, for some of them, it's the first time that they'll be measured by scouts, and you really get a better sense for what the total picture is, including on players both at big and small schools. So for our scouts, they're really able to gather a lot of data during this process, and you're also able to get access to coaching staff that you might not have had, specifically in this fall. This year, more than most, I'd say that there's more information that's been gathered during this part of the process. So there's more to review, and it doesn't necessarily mean that players are going to change on our board or what their status is, but we play the entire process out. We make sure that we do a thorough job. We listen to everybody who had a chance to see the player and evaluate them, and we make sure that all the information we gather does get reviewed. So there's still plenty left. There's more on some players than others, but we're definitely going to play the process out.
So many things on my mind right now. Is it easier this year, not from the perspective of dealing with the pandemic and doing a virtual draft last year, but that was Joe Douglas's first draft as GM of the New York Jets, and we all know, headlined by a foundational piece, it looks like, in Mekhi Becton. But as far as the grading system, I imagine you guys were working with the new grading system last year, and now the continuity is there the second time around.
Yeah, sure. So, with each grading system you use, there are basics that, that it follows. Just the language is just a little bit different. So you're always going to grade based on the level of talent that a player has, whether it be a high-end starter, a starter, low-end starter, and so forth, all the way down through a player that would be good for bringing into camp. So really, it's just a little bit of a learning experience to understand the nuance of how a specific level applies to this grading scale. They did a great job coming and Joe, Phil, Chad. They had all obviously been with this grading scale previously, so we did a lot of work initially, talking about historically how different players fit into the scale, and allowed our scouts to really relate to it and hit the ground running last year. This year is just continuing to build on that, continue to communicate, and make sure that we're all speaking the same language. And a lot of that is part of our role here in personnel operations, and making sure the entire group speaks the same language, and relaying information from our office to our scouts on the road, who it's just overall harder to do that. So we keep a high level of communication and try to make sure everybody's speaking the same language.
10 picks in total this year, 5 in the first 3 rounds, 2 in the first round. How excited would you describe, or how would you describe the excitement on your side of the building to finally put all this hard work and get through the draft and try to make a difference for this team?
Yeah, I mean, the draft every year obviously is a really rewarding process for our scouts. The work that they put in, the time they spend away from their families and working. I mean, it's really incredible to see it all come together. So to have this many opportunities to make our team better is always exciting. We saw that process during free agency as well, and it's really going to be great to go through the process with the group and just kind of see where it falls. So we're excited about it for sure.
So pick 2 is huge. We know that. So we're going to ask you who you guys are going to select. No, just kidding. I want to ask you about the importance of day 3 and beyond, because I think oftentimes, this, people focus on those first round picks that are very important, or the second round, and those are important as well. But once you get to day 3, you guys have 5 draft picks. That is half of the 2021 draft class if you stay where you're at. And then also the importance of the undrafted free agents.
Yeah, so that's really where the scouting process kicks in. and you can reap the benefits of having a really good process throughout the year. With the players that are further down the line, specifically when you get to undrafted free agency, it really becomes a scout driven process at times. We have specific scouts that are assigned as cross checks for positions, and they work directly with our coaching staff to work that back half of the draft and the undrafted process. So, that group getting together and really, understanding what each other want, what type of player we want, what type of person we want in this building, really allows you to hit on those later prospects and those undrafted players. So, in a lot of ways, that's just as exciting as day one and day two, for our scouts, because they really get to take the wheel and put their stamp on, the players that are coming into this building.
My final question to you, Dan, is EA mentioned the continuity of the grading system, but what about the continuity of the group as a whole, and how much, how much chemistry has there been built from year one to year two, and what does that mean in terms of the scouting process?
Yeah, it's always a concern. It was earlier this year, just in the situation we're in, not being able to get together. Normally we'd see each other in December. We'd see each other at all-star games, the combine. So, those events weren't really able to happen this year in a way that they traditionally would. But, we did a really great job staying in communication, getting on Teams calls frequently, being able to talk to each other. I think the communication this year really was at a higher level than it's ever been. And I think we're gonna see the rewards of that, as we finish up this process here. So, we have a great group of scouts. We have an outstanding group of coaches. We're excited to see those two groups work together, and we're really focused on this part of the process here and leading up to a successful draft.
You mentioned Microsoft Teams. I feel like everybody in the organization has worked in teams and benefited from it. But as far as a football perspective, what would you tell somebody like my father, is 81, 82 years old, has no idea what you're talking about, Microsoft Teams? But from a football scouting perspective, why was it advantageous, not only during the year, but potentially in future years?
Yeah, so what we found last year was during this part of the year, we were able to really increase the communication between college players and our staff, both college and college scouting staff and coaching staff, in a way that we hadn't been able to really do previously. Being able to get on a Teams call, easily bring up video from a prospect's playing season, have him review that really seamlessly without any lag or error. Really, replicated the combine process for us, where our coach would normally sit and talk with players for a brief period of time. So, we're really able to act like you're sitting with somebody in person, without having to fly across the country or plan everything out. You can just go back to back and talk to players, get to know them better, understand more about their personality and how they fit into their scheme, what type of player they are, and it just really increases everyone's knowledge of the draft and what we have in front of us.
Okay, so millions of Jets fans would love to be in your shoes draft weekend, DZ, you specifically, and tell them why. I want you to tell folks what you actually do before that pick is in. Can you tell us about the process? Take us behind the scenes.
Sure. So I'm in communication with, this year it'll be with the league directly. We'll be on a conference call with them to make sure we can convey our pick or any movement that happens before us, before we get on the clock. And then we'll be in communication with Joe and Robert and Mr. Johnson and all of our scouts, as we get onto the clock, just really discussing, what our options are and what direction we might go in. And at the end of the process, I'm able to go ahead and send a name to the league and submit the pick itself, which is always a cool process to complete. And so it's really, being at the center of things and being able to be around the entire process is a really exciting time for us.
Nerve-wracking or old hat for you by now?
It always can be nerve-wracking. Especially like if the most exciting part for me, being in the room, besides actually, selecting a pick, is if you're, executing an on-the-clock trade. If you're going to trade out of a pick, really the entire room is working. You have Dave Sosie's on the phone with the league trying to get the terms together. You have the scouts that were working with that with that team, discussing what the terms of the trade are. You still have our normal process if the trade were to not work out, where we still have to be able to be prepared to select a pick. So when we're in that part of the process, which obviously happens often enough throughout the year, that's always really exciting and can be nerve-wracking as the time clicks down in front of you. But that's where your rehearsals and your communication pay off in the end, where you can trust everybody to get their job done in a small period of time and execute.
I'm an adrenaline junkie. I bet you got to be too during that weekend.
Yeah, I mean, it's what we do the entire process for. It's why we spend all the time we do, and really the event itself is awesome, and really looking forward to it this year.
Great insight from Dan, and I did say we would talk some draft. So there's two things that I want to discuss, or you have the option which one you want to discuss.
Thank you.
Option A, we can talk about the idea of trading up, which is one that we haven't really seen Joe Douglas do in his one draft as GM. So let's talk about that. Or two, how about just players who are on the top of mind, like just guys that come like that I wonder what this guy's kind of like or whatever, because we're in the thick of draft season, and we can kind of combine both of them.
Let's go option one first.
Okay. So,
because we kind of wrote about it on NewYorkJets.com over the weekend. I just think that, to your point, he's got the ammo to move up if he wants, if the Jets are targeting a specific player. And how is the board going to fall? Because in this draft, like many that have preceded this selection process, the quarterbacks dictate what's going to happen. And it sure seems right now there are going to be a lot of quarterbacks taken in the top 10.
Yeah. The thing that I think of that I find when thinking about this draft is tough is we kind of know what types of players Joe Douglas likes, and we kind of know what types of players Robert Saleh likes, because you think of the culture, it's works from the inside out on both sides of the ball. But what types of traits do running backs in this system have, wide receivers, tight ends? I mean, we don't know the answers to that on offense or defense. And I think that is the wild card in all of this. So let's say, what's kind of on my mind, if there is a receiver that the Jets like and there's a cluster, what do they value different traits wise? We don't know the answer to that. So if there is a player that squeaks out of, the top 12, then you're in the teens.
Yeah.
The Jets have the ammo to make that move, but I don't know what player they would make the move for based on traits alone.
Yeah. And how high are you going to go? And the other side of the coin is, let's take last year as an example, and Joe Douglas moving down in the second round and obtaining even more picks in the process, and still obviously having a group of players in mind and getting Baylor receiver Denzel Mims after moving down 11 slots in the second round.
Yeah, and I think that I think the narrative around Joe right now is that he likes to trade down because of last year. Well, the Jets didn't have the draft capital that they do now at this time last year, right? They only had their picks. They didn't have the extra one, the extra three. Now they not only have the moves or the ammo to make moves in the first round. I think really where an interesting conversation is they have the first pick or the second pick in the second round.
That's right.
They have 2 third-round picks. Maybe if there's a player in the second round that they think they want, they have the ammo to get back into that round. I think that's an interesting thought as well.
Yeah, I just think you're going to have a lot of options. And right now, what we're seeing, what we believe is going to happen is a lot of quarterbacks, offensive playmakers being taken in the top 10.
Mm-hmm.
How many defensive players are going to be taken in the top 10? Are we talking 2?
Yeah.
Are we talking 1?
It might be 1. I mean, I think, and what a lot of people think that's going to be not Caleb Farley. That's a player I want to talk about, Patrick Surtain.
Yeah.
So speaking of Farley, I think this is an interesting conversation point. We kind of talked about it earlier today when we were recording our cornerbacks preview on NewYorkJets.com. Check it out. Caleb Farley was regarded as CB2, right, behind Surtain. Then he gets surgery late in the process, still scheduled to be on time and healthy by the season. I'm not sure about training camp, but where does that become a conversation if you're an NFL team? This is now where we see the value to get Caleb Farley and add him to our roster.
Well, what's interesting about him is that he had back surgery. He didn't play in the 2020 season. He just had that procedure recently. If his medical checks out, I think most guys, and you've been talking to Dane throughout the year, and we've been reading other analysts and talking to people, I think most people would say he's a top 10 talent. He's 6'2", 207 pounds, ball production. He's a cornerback. Some cornerbacks, they have good skills, but the ball production isn't there. This is a guy who takes the ball away. 4 interceptions in 2019, 6 interceptions over the course of his career at Virginia Tech. Some people think he would be really well suited to play in a zone system, and everybody's expecting, oh, the Jets are automatically playing cover 3, cover 2. They're going to play some man too. To your point about Mike LaFleur, like Mike LaFleur last week, I would flip to the other side of the ball too. We have these preconceived notions that Saleh ran it exactly like this at these various stops, and Jeff Ulbrich ran it like this in Atlanta. Well, it's going to be completely unique to the Jets, the way they ultimately decide they're going to run things in the back end this year.
Yeah, with LaFleur in particular, the thing that intrigues me, a lot of people compare maybe what the Jets will run to what the San Francisco 49ers have run in the past. And I understand it. They have, and the reason why I'm bringing this up is because of the popularity of a running back in the first or second round to the Jets in the mock draft circuit. The 49ers haven't drafted running back since 2017. On the flip side, Mike LaFleur's brother, Matt LaFleur, runs an offense with Aaron Jones.
That's right.
And they drafted A.J. Dillon early last year. So, where do the Jets fall in terms of approach at the running back position is one of the things I'm most interested in. It's like a microcosm of what the Jets situation is right now. We don't know what kind of offense they're going to run. We have an idea, but we don't know what wrinkles LaFleur will add or subtract that's similar or dissimilar to what Shanahan runs.
Yeah. So the defensive side of the ball, I'm going to flip it to the other side and say that Bryce Hall and Bless Austin, I think both have physical skill sets that would match what we've seen in this system in the past. As we sit here and we talk about it every week, there's some questions at nickel because Brian Poole's out there and Javelin Guidry did some really good things last year. The Jets have a lot of young cornerbacks on the roster, but you have 10 draft picks. You could certainly use a couple draft picks at the cornerback position.
Are you Farley, if he's available at 34?
Oh my God.
Slam dunk?
If his medical checks out?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, what about 23 then?
Oh, you'd certainly big time consider that. Let me throw another wild card at you. What if Farley and JC Horn are there at 23?
Yeah, that would be like a great problem to have, I think. I mean, if you're Joe Douglas,
that my point on 23, just following up quick, is that I do think there's going to be a few good football players. There could be a bunch of them, and that's why I think ultimately moving down might be an interesting option once we get there.
Yeah. The other thing I'll say, I'm not comparing any player to this player. I'm just saying when you look at the talent in recent years, let's go back to last year, Justin Jefferson, 22nd overall selection? There's good talent in the 20s there. DeAndre Hopkins, 27th overall. Yeah. We just recorded receivers with Dane Brugler, which is why I know both of those guys. I'm not just thinking wide receiver here.
Jefferson was amazing last year. You think about that trade. And that's what you want in a National Football League. You want a trade to work out for both sides. The Bills get Stephon Diggs. He leads the NFL in receptions and receiving yards. And then Minnesota gets this guy, Justin Jefferson, late in the first round. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, that is the epitome of a win-win. And we're going to continue to break down the draft from every angle. We have a couple of tricks up our sleeve coming up, even though the draft is around the corner.
Well, a final question.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Linebacker. How many linebackers will be taken before 23?
I would say a maximum of 2, assuming you think Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah plays linebacker.
Yes,
so,
I do.
So then, yeah, I think it's a maximum of 2. I think if I were,
and Micah Parsons going first, or do you think?
I think it's a toss up, but I think
JOK could go first.
I saw someone put out there that maybe teams aren't as high on Parsons as maybe the media is, but it is smokescreen season. So I think this. I think if you were at 23 and you were putting the over-under, I think the over-under is at 1.5 before 23.
What's the over-under corners?
I'd say the over-under is
1.5.
before
Or would
23.
you say 2?
I'd say 2.5.
2.5.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, by 23. So is it Surtain and Horn, and does Farley squeak in there?
Yeah, Farley's medical checks out. I just don't know how realistic it's going to be that he'd be there at 23. I think that might even be crazy talk.
It might be crazy talk, but this is what makes the draft fun, is the crazy talk.
Yeah, I just think that the Jets are in a very favorable position. Not only is, hey, we know it's a fair assessment, they're taking a quarterback at 2, but then what's going to happen at 23 and how is that board going to fall? And ultimately, you let the draft play out and then you start working the calls in both directions.
Right.
Because I think Joe's right now open-minded and everything. And with 21 picks over the next 2 years, you have a lot of flexibility and you could give up picks without really damaging yourself long-term, because I think we've spoken to a couple of internal people about it, and they said the Jets basically have 3 draft classes in the next 21 picks. Typically, you have 7 picks a year.
Yeah, the Jets are in a good position this year, next year. It'll be fascinating to see how it all plays out. And like I said, we got some tricks up our sleeves before the draft hits in a couple of weeks here. So stay tuned to the Draft Podcast presented by Pepsi on the official Jets podcast.